The outdoor season has already been quite explosive, and it's been difficult to keep up with all the bear attack news. It began with an incident in British Columbia where a woman was attacked by a mother grizzly while walking her dog. Again, I remind you that dogs and bears are a problematic mix. A short time later in Arizona, a 14-year-old boy was attacked by a black bear while he was watching TV inside a cabin. And then, in one weekend, 2 men were attacked by grizzlies. One a hunter near Elkford, British Columbia. The other a lone hiker who was attacked by a mother grizzly while exploring Grand Teton National Park while on his honeymoon. Fortunately, no humans have yet been killed, though 2 of the bears involved in these attacks have been. But in these recent attacks, I see more than good fortune for the survivors. The universe has gifted informed travelers 2 unbelievably educational incidents within just a matter of days. You simply could not pick 2 more informative attacks to compare and contrast than the attack near Elkford, British Columbia, and the attack on Signal Mountain in Grand Teton National Park involving Shayne Patrick. The hunter in British Columbia used his gun to defend himself, mortally wounding the bear in the process, and yet still suffered significant injuries. If you haven't already, make sure to watch my full analysis video linked here. Shayne, on the other hand, was carrying bear spray, but by his own admission, he, quote, locked up and did not deploy his bear spray in time. And yet it still saved his life, though he too suffered significant injuries. Now, independent of his bear attack, Shayne is remarkable in his own right. He's a combat veteran and has recently recovered from major surgery where doctors removed a brain tumor, which means Shayne has already survived more existential threats than most people ever will, and has now added attacked by a grizzly bear to the list. Shayne wrote on his Instagram page, "I've experienced being shot at, mortared, and IED explosions," but then describes his recent showdown with a mother grizzly as, quote, the most violent thing I have ever experienced. Shayne and his wife were honeymooning on a 3-week van tour of the West. They had previously toured both Badlands and Yellowstone National Parks before making an impromptu stop in Grand Teton National Park, where Shayne hoped to photograph a great gray owl. Shayne's wife Chloe had read online that they had a good chance of spotting a great gray owl in the woods of Signal Mountain. At first, they had traveled together along the Signal Mountain Road, accompanied by their dog, which they tried to keep near the road as per park regulations. After some time, Chloe returned to their car, taking their dog with her while Shayne continued his search, promising Chloe that he'd be back at the car in 1 hour. While traveling both on and off the road, Shayne encountered dozens of other people, including a tour group, which reported to Shayne that they had not seen any sign of bears in the area. As Shayne tells it, 1 hour and 15 minutes lapsed since he struck out on his own, and he knew Chloe was going to begin worrying. He apparently had poor signal at the time, which is common in Greater Yellowstone. In consequence, he decided to, quote, beeline it back to the car, using the GPS on his phone, which offered limited functionality without pre-downloaded maps and reliable cellular signal. Choosing to sing and talk out loud to himself as a precaution, Shayne rightfully points out in his accounts that making noise can sometimes prevent bear attacks by giving bears advanced warning and allowing them to move away from approaching hikers. But he was also doing a couple of things that are known to increase the likelihood of an attack. First, Shayne was by himself. It is always best to travel with responsible and knowledgeable companions. And it's not at all surprising that Shayne, rather than the tour group or another group of travelers, incurred the defensive wrath of this particular mother grizzly. Had the tour group been the party to encounter the mother bear, it's a practical certainty that no one would have been hurt and that the grizzly and her cub would have simply moved on. The risk of aggression is always much higher if you're by yourself when you encounter a bear, especially a grizzly. The next issue I see is Shayne's mode of travel. His accounts strongly suggest that he was traveling off trail at the time of the attack. Bears, especially in national parks, are not ignorant of the trails and corridors used by humans. When traveling off-trail, something Shayne has in common with the hunter who was attacked just days before near Elkford, British Columbia, you remove a known variable for any bears you might encounter and thus introduce a greater level of risk. However, knowing that a bear encounter was a distinct possibility, Shayne was talking and singing to himself as well as breaking branches as he traveled towards the parking lot in an attempt to make noise to prevent an unwanted encounter. But there was a problem. It was an extremely windy day, which would have made it almost impossible for the mother bear to hear his vocalizations from a distance. Shayne also says that he was, quote, walking fast. Now that's not much to go on, but moving rapidly through cover adds another point of vulnerability, especially when alone, and when ambient noise like heavy wind can easily cloak your or a bear's approach. Now I freely admit that I don't know how fast Shayne was moving, so I'm not going to speculate. But if you find yourself alone in grizzly country, whether it's noisy or not, I advise that you favor traveling at a deliberately reduced pace, giving yourself time to thoroughly survey your surroundings, while also giving nearby bears an improved chance of avoiding an unwanted encounter. Moving quickly, especially in a noisy environment, can lead you right into a mother grizzly's lap, which appears to be exactly what happened to Shayne. While walking fast through the woods, Shayne says that he overcame a feature on the slope to his right, which he describes as a small hill. That's when he saw a brown bear cub running uphill at an estimated distance of 50 to 70 yards. Now, if you're in grizzly country, particularly solo hikers, I generally advise that you carry your bear spray in your hand, especially if walking through heavy cover, in order to eliminate one process should you stumble upon a bear. Shayne was carrying his bear spray in the holster at the time, but wisely retrieved it the moment that he saw the cub running up the hill. But almost in parallel with retrieving his spray, Shayne glanced to his left and caught sight of the mother grizzly charging directly towards him. And while absent in his written accounts, in an interview which he gave to ABC News, Shayne says that he, quote, locked up, adding, the decision-making in such a fearful moment, it's insane how fast it happens. And based on another interview, Shayne estimates that only 3 seconds lapsed between seeing the cub and then being attacked by the mother grizzly. Now, Shayne deserves a lot of credit for having the courage and integrity to admit how he, a combat veteran and a survivor of cancer, was afraid and, quote, locked up. Anyone with half a brain knows the peril of facing off with a grizzly, and none of us gets to pick our programmed biochemical response to an imminent threat. Years ago, when I was far less experienced with bears, I once stood 30 feet from a grizzly, and even with bear spray in my hand, I was nervous. Even though I had educated myself, and intellectually I knew what to do, I've often wondered if I would have been able to put that knowledge into practice had the bear decided to charge. Now, I don't know if Shayne has ever practiced spraying either an inert bear spray canister or real bear spray. He said that despite being familiar with black bears out east in Massachusetts, that before this trip out west, he, quote, had never even thought about bear spray. Which suggests to me that he was not particularly well practiced with his defensive tool. And as I've discussed in both my Guns vs. Bear Spray video and my interview with Todd Orr, who endured back-to-back attacks after spraying a mother grizzly, your absolute best chance of deploying a deterrent correctly and in time was through repeated and intelligent practice, which is exactly why I am again teaming up with Todd Orr, but this time to critique the internet's suggested bear charge drills and analogs and rate them on how well they simulate an actual bear attack. You don't want to miss this. So make sure to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so that you know the moment that video drops. Milliseconds matter in a crisis, and you need to develop the muscle memory to help you overcome the fear and paralysis that often set in. And even if you're exceptionally well practiced with your defensive tools, nothing can quite prepare you for the experience of staring down a charging grizzly. None of us will ever truly know whether we're ready until we stand where Shayne has stood and are forced to put our education and training into practice. Shayne made lots of really solid decisions, including shouting at the bear and standing his ground. But in the moment, he concluded that he didn't have time to spray the bear, at which point Shayne made two critical decisions that undoubtedly helped save his life. First, he turned his back to the mother grizzly just in time for her to knock him to the ground, where he used his hands and arms to protect his head and neck. Second, though he didn't do it consciously, Shayne held on to his bear spray, which was interlocked in his fingers while he was protecting his head and neck. What happened next was very much a matter of luck, but combined with Shayne's informed defensive actions, that little dash of luck made all the difference. Once a bear makes contact, your whole focus shifts from preventing an attack to ending the attack as soon as possible. With grizzlies, that typically means playing dead. By turning his back at the last second and laying prone, Shayne protected his vitals, but also allowed his back and his pack to help blunt the trauma. But as I'm sure Shayne will attest, you are still very much vulnerable, even when in a prone defensive position. Now, like most grizzly attack victims, Shayne describes the bear picking him up and slamming him into the ground as he endured crushing bites to his butt, back, and legs. One bite, which Shayne believes grazed his femur, caused such pain that he screamed. It was at that point that the bear's strategy changed. She stopped biting his leg and went straight for his head. Ironically, while such a development would normally be the last thing you want to happen, in Shayne's case, it was the next domino to fall in an incredible succession of events that ultimately saved his life. While enduring a crushing bite to his hand, Shayne says that he then heard a pop. At first, he thought the bear had bitten into his skull, but then he heard her run off. It took him a few moments. It was at that point that he realized that the bear had bitten into his canister of bear spray, which he had unconsciously held onto throughout the attack. The explosion of irritant ended the attack immediately and sent the mother grizzly running, at which point Shayne, despite his injuries, shot up and instinctively ran uphill in the opposite direction of the bear. After running for approximately half a mile, alone and bleeding heavily, Shayne realized that he had randomly regained cellular signal and contacted his wife Chloe, who immediately reverted to her EMT training, helping him appraise his injuries and improvise a number of tourniquets to slow the bleeding until he could be located by emergency response personnel. With his back against a tree, gripping his knife as a last desperate defensive measure, it would take approximately 2 hours before rescue teams were able to locate Shayne and airlift him to a waiting ambulance. Perhaps most remarkable of all, while severely injured and in immediate mortal danger, Shayne pled with rangers to not kill the bear that attacked him, saying, quote, "She was just protecting her cub." If any of us has cause to fear these animals, it's Shayne Patrick. Yet despite his harrowing experience, Shayne recognized the bear's inherent right to protect herself and her cub from a perceived threat. Now, the attack was clearly unnecessary. Shayne was hoping to photograph an owl and had absolutely no intention of harming either the mother bear or her cub. But bears live a rough life in the wild, and there are very real threats, especially to mother bears with cubs, and as a result, they are often defensively aggressive. Human mothers often instinctually do the same thing. They will protect their children with whatever means they have available to them, sometimes even when no actual threat exists. None of us has a perfect grasp of the hazards that we or our children face, and all we can do is our best. And that's exactly what this mother bear did. I commend Shayne for both his clear thinking under pressure, but also understanding that the bear's action was not malicious and simply a defensive mechanism. If you're planning on exploring bear country, especially grizzly country, then I implore you, do yourself and wildlife a massive favor by mastering the bear attack ABCs, which I've covered thoroughly in the video linked here. Bear safety is not that complicated as long as you have access to the right resources, which are unfortunately frustratingly difficult to find in the internet age. Fortunately, you're in the right place. So for more of the best bear safety resources available, make sure to subscribe to At Home and Wild Spaces. And until next time, this is Mike, reminding you that when the crisis arrives, the time for preparation has passed.